Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in. This is Idil, your host, and you are listening to the podcast series Virtual Realities. This is a new podcast series about study techniques where I talk to students, professors, and others to learn from you and inspire you. In this episode, I'm with Gustav Halldin, and he will share his thoughts for increasing peer-to-peer interaction and how that might apply to an emergency situation such as this. In the previous episode, our theme was how to effectively use collaboration platforms to its full potential as an interactive, engaging, and meaningful space. This time, talking to Gustav, I will try to understand how we can deliberately use these platforms to encourage interactivity and engagement during class time. Let's start with hearing from you, Gustav. Can you tell a little bit about yourself?
Hey, of course I can. First, thanks for having me. I'm a 22-year-old male business student at NMBU from Oslo. I'm in my final semester of my bachelor's degree, and throughout my degree, I've been very present in the student democracy at NMBU. And as such, I'm currently running for president of the student parliament.
Apart from that, have you been taking classes this semester?
I have, yeah. I'm doing a class in microeconomics, advanced microeconomics. I'm doing environmental management systems and sustainability reports, and I'm doing a course on how to run a business.
How did it translate into online education, your classes?
The teachers have been especially the business and the microeconomics course, the teachers have been they seem rather proficient with using online tools. So they put out a lot of resources online that we can use, and they use Zoom lectures, and they record their meetings for us to watch at a later point so that we can do stuff in whichever fashion suits us best. If we want to watch the teachers live and ask questions like in chat, or if we want to watch it at our own time at a later period and then ask them questions via email or stuff like that. So I think they've been doing quite a good job using Zoom and my media side on Canvas. However, in my final class, they just put out what seems to me being lectures in a PowerPoint and just publish it online, and it's a bit mixed.
In your new classroom environments, how do you continue interacting with your peers and with your instructors?
In my sustainability reporting class, our only grade this semester is from a paper that we're writing in groups. So through that, I'm able to connect with my peers. So we're using Google Docs and we're using Zoom for meetings to work through the syllabus that we're supposed to, which I find a viable way to keep in touch with my peers. But it doesn't really allow for interaction peer to instructor. Whereas in my other two classes, microeconomics and business, it's easier to connect with the teacher through the online lectures where you can ask questions, but at the same time, you don't get the same interaction with your peers because they're just not really present in the same way you would if you're there in a class, raising your hand, asking a question, so another can ask a follow-up question or come up to you after class and say hey, I thought of the same thing and I'm still curious. Can we do some research on it?
Then what thoughts do you have in mind that could improve or increase student engagement or student interaction?
I think perhaps using more group work colloquiums to stimulate peer-to-peer learning even more and have not just big deliverable at the end of the semester, but rather more small, not too small of course, because it would take too much time in regards to other classes and stuff, but smaller deliverables also throughout the semester. So that has to be done in groups. It's easier to get this peer-to-peer learning than it would be if you're just all sitting by yourself.
Having someone to facilitate those small interactions.
Oh yeah, that would be of great benefit as well.
Because I know that this is something you were talking about when you had an exchange in Australia.
Yeah, when I was in Australia last semester, we had group work that we had to do throughout the semester, but not just that had to be delivered and worked upon outside of classes and tutorials, but also stuff that we did in the tutorials themselves, which also counted a part towards our final mark. So that if you showed up to all the tutorials, you could work with your peers, you could have peer-to-peer learning, and at the end of the class, you delivered a small report from what you did that tutorial. And if you met up in, say, I'm just tossing out a random number here, 15 out of 20 tutorials, then you could get 2 to 5% of your mark, depending on if it was adequate or not. So they kind of nudged us towards having that peer-to-peer learning as well. So if you were keen to get as much marks as possible in the class, you could meet in these tutorials But whereas if you were only exam focused, then hey, it's only 5% of your grade anyway, for example. So they would just keep nudging us to have more peer-to-peer learning and do more small work just to get that extra bit of added benefit.
Do you think this can translate into our situation, our current situation?
I definitely think it could, yeah, because if we don't have to have much group work, we could just have smaller colloquiums, and with teachers' assistants facilitating this, just move group meetings to Microsoft Teams or to Zoom, and for just like half an hour, then you can work through the syllabus, post questions, have more peer-to-peer learning with like maybe 5 to 10 people, so you don't have the perceived pressure of 20 or more of your peers sitting around you. And if it were in person, I would have used quotation marks with my fingers, but I'm just going to say quotation mark pressure, or they're just judging you.
Can you expand a little bit about what you mean by that?
At least some students, especially in your first year of uni, you feel that others might be judging you when you post a question, or you feel like, hey, is this a stupid question or not? Or is this something everyone else gets but I don't? So people are kind of intimidating from asking questions because they don't want to feel stupid, or they don't want to seem like a laggard in the class, or not being able to go through all the stuff in class that maybe the teacher wanted to, because they just want to ask a question or they don't understand. So people refrain from asking questions instead because they're so intimidated.
What do you think they can do to overcome this feeling so they can actually interact with their peers and also their questions don't go unaddressed?
If you have smaller groups, then you can build up this self-esteem, this self-belief that, hey, my question isn't dumb, or, well, it's a legitimate question, so you can just post it, and you don't feel that there's a lot of people around you who would judge you. You to grow more comfortable in your own time. It's easier for others to answer, or the teacher, or whoever wants to answer. It's easier to have these moments where people can help you.
Yeah, that is definitely true. The smaller the size of the group gets, the more comfortable or safe you feel inside your environment.
Exactly.
And this can also be executed on online platforms as well.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think it's very easy to do so.
How might we support instructors during these times for improved facilitation and enhanced collaboration?
These times moving everything online and having to plan everything from scratch, I think, can be rather stressful for course facilitators as well as students. So I think taking small measures can alleviate some of that pressure from the instructors. And one of the example that I have that two of my instructors used when deciding whether or not we should have grades on our final exam, as people can perceive the pressure or perceive that their learning environment is much poorer now that they're home all the time compared to being at school revising. So they asked the class, okay, do you want a grade or do you want to pass or fail? And so the class responded in an anonymous online form, of course, and it came to the teacher's attention that 63% of students approximately wanted to have graded exams because they felt that, hey, this motivates us more. So using these small platforms for students to get engaged or have a more democratic say in how the class is facilitated or how it's actually how it's implemented. I think having students have a say in how the class is implemented, I think, can alleviate some of the pressure from the instructors, but also make the students more motivated for their classes.
And it's a very democratic way of deciding what will happen in these really interesting, strange, unprecedented times.
Yeah, and if you just give your students an extra bit of motivation and give them some democratic choices, they might also give teachers more feedback, which I think would also be extra valuable in these times, because then they can see, okay, what works and what doesn't work. And for the teachers to receive that extra feedback from the students motivates them more and enables them to plan for what the students want, what the student likes, essentially what works and what doesn't.
Thank you very much, Gustav. This has been great. To recap what you have said, to summarize what you have said, because there were some really good insights in there. You talked about breaking down groups into smaller sizes to alleviate stress and awkwardness, so enhanced learning takes place. You also mentioned incentivizing these tutorials by giving more scores or points, and you also mentioned feedback mechanisms and democratic processes to increase interaction. Thank you so much. Thank you for participating.
Thanks for having me.
See you at the next episode. This is Idil, your host, and reach out to me at virtualrealities.info@gmail.com. Thank you.